All right, good morning, friends. Time for the hands-free drive to work. You can keep your hands on the wheel and at the very same time have a conversation about steering yourself through the weeds of work. We have been talking about managing ourselves well. We've been talking about how self-management or self-leadership is the prequel to every great leadership book ever, because you'll never learn to lead others until you first learn how to lead yourself. And so in talking about learning how to lead ourselves well or manage ourselves well, we said we'll never act differently until we decide differently, and we'll never decide differently until we start to think differently. And so we've spent a lot of time talking about the way we think about work and finding a new direction for really winning in work. We said that a met need necessarily precedes any profits or incentives that come back to us. And we said that's how we can think differently about work, is the work itself is actually moving out to meet needs, not moving out to gain profits or incentives, because met needs always come before profits and incentives. So we had to think differently about our work. Then we had to learn to decide differently about our work, and that's what we're talking about still this morning, is we're trying to decide differently. And we learned this in the first video. We learned it from James March's research. He said that we don't often make decisions from a cost-benefit analysis, a pros and cons list. We make a decision from identity. And so we have to learn to indirectly affect our choices by building new identity. And the building blocks of identity are character traits. So we have to when we build new character traits, work that logic backwards. When we build new character traits, we build a new identity. Then when we build a new identity, James March says we'll make decisions from that identity, and we'll do things we'll just do things by deciding without consciously always going through a pros and cons list. And then we'll make new decisions because we have a new identity based on new building blocks or new character traits. A lot to think about, I know, but do you see how it all comes together? That's why we always say, well, I know what to do, but I just don't do it. It's because we think we can just say, okay, you tell me what to do, and I'll just decide to go do it. But no, we have to learn how to decide differently. We have to come about it in an indirect way. We said it's more like saving up to purchase a piece of equipment to grade out an entire parking lot than it is to walk outside, get in that equipment, and just grade the parking lot. Because of course it takes only a day to grade the parking lot, maybe, if you have the right equipment. But it takes a long time to save up for that. In the same way, what took months can now only take days or hours, but we do have to pay the price. We do have to develop these new character traits before we can do in hours what previously took us months. We can make decisions immediately because they're coming from our identity. We don't have to make a cost-benefit rational analysis. We don't have to make a pros and cons list every time. We're not going to. James March says you do this from identity, so we better mind our identity or we'll never make new decisions. And so what we talked about previously is how to build the character trait of grit. If we're going to act differently and we're going to think differently about our work, we need to develop the character trait of grit. We need to show up even when it's difficult. We need to persevere even when things are difficult, because we know that weeds come up in work. So we need to be able to push through and around and steer through those weeds of work. So the next trait we're going to talk about today is this may be a surprising one for you, about just how really productive and engaged that this character trait will make you when you're steering yourself through the weeds of work. It's gentleness. Gentleness. I know you think maybe, come on, gentleness is not an essential element in work. We need to be rugged and individualistic. We don't need gentleness. But listen, let me tell you, we said we had to have the 3 E's. First, we have to have gentleness explained. Then we need to see an example of gentleness, and then we need to experience gentleness. And let me walk you through those 3 E's of gentleness, and you tell me after this is over, you tell me if this would help you become more productive and more engaged in your work. Gentleness is a trait that I think is most personified by this quick story. Not long ago, my dentist, Brittany Bonds, Brittany, hey, you're watching. So Brittany, actually, I went and had a tooth cavity worked on. And I know this has happened multiple times when I've been there, but I never noticed it until just a few visits ago. But I noticed while she gave me a shot to numb my gums, which I hate, by the way. It's the worst part of the entire ordeal. I'd rather just have the work done without a shot. But while she gave me a shot to numb my gums, her assistant was blowing some air on my face. And I noticed this while it was happening. And, really after I thought about it, I could think back, and I've noticed that that's happened many times. I just never realized it before this one particular time. And again, I know it has happened before, because when I did notice it, when I became conscious of it, then I knew it had happened many times before, but I just never really thought about it before. But what was she doing when the assistant was blowing that air on my cheek while Brittany was giving me the shot in my gums? She was just making sure that tough thing that I was receiving, it was good for me. The shot was something that was good for me. It was something I needed, but it was a tough thing to accept. And while I was accepting that tough thing, she was blowing a little air on my cheek so that I could better receive that tough medicine. So that is gentleness. Gentleness is when you're able to, as one author put it, correct others with gentleness. He said to correct others with gentleness because he knew that it'd be better received. Correction is always tough. Anytime we're trying to receive new information, or somebody's debating us or saying that something we're doing is incorrect, or even if it's a product that we really need and somebody's selling it to us, it's kind of hard to hear sometimes. But when we have that gentleness that goes along with it, just that breeze on the cheek, it makes that hard, tough medicine that we really need even more receivable. It makes it where we can actually take it into our lives. And that's what gentleness really is. Gentleness is being able to present tough information or tough, a confrontation in a way that's more receivable. That's what gentleness really is when we come to our work. And I think, this example is amazing to me. I love this example of gentleness, and I don't even know the individual who displayed this kind of gentleness. But there is a magician, you've probably heard of Penn and Teller. So Penn, the magician, he actually put out a YouTube video. It's been years ago. I'll never forget it as long as I live, because Penn put out this YouTube video, and he said that one night after one of their shows, a man came up to him. He said he hung around. I could tell he was kind of waiting around until the crowd thinned a little bit. He said, but he hung around and he wanted to talk to me. And he said he came over to me that night. And this is a YouTube video. Penn, you can look it up. Penn staring into the camera. And he said that the gentleman came over and he said, he kept on saying this. He looked me in the eyes. That must have been something very important for Penn, that someone looked them in the eyes. So sorry, while I'm driving, I can't do that for you. But he said he looked me in the eyes, and he said, I want to tell you something. He said, I want to tell you that I am a Christian. And the reason this video is so moving to me and such a good example of gentleness to me is because Penn is not a Christian. He's an atheist. He doesn't believe there's a God who created the world at all. But this man who came up to him and started the conversation with Penn, I am a Christian. This moved Penn so much to be able to make a YouTube video. And whether you agree with Christianity or not agree with Christianity is not the point at this present moment. But I want you to just see what happened in this story. The man who is a Christian comes up. He says, I want to talk to you about Christianity. And it moved Penn, an atheist, to create a YouTube video to actually tell about this encounter. Now, religion and politics are the two most divisive things in the whole history of the world. So those are the two things that we're not supposed to talk about. However, Penn is making a video about this man coming and speaking to him. I want to see what kind of interaction this was between these two people to create this response from Penn. And Penn said this in the YouTube video. He said, the gentleman came up and talked to me. He looked me in the eyes. He said, I'm a Christian. He said Penn said he wasn't he wasn't overbearing, but he said he was proselytizing. That's just the word that he was saying. He was trying to convince Penn that Christianity was true and relevant to his life and that he should actually listen to the teachings of Jesus. Penn said this guy was absolutely proselytizing, but he said it made me think, this interaction made me think, if you do believe there is an afterlife, Penn said, how bad do you have to hate others to keep that information from them? Penn said, how bad do you have to hate me if you walk by me knowing I'm an atheist? How bad must you hate me if you just keep walking and go about your normal life? He said, if you don't tell me, and this is the example Penn gave, he said, if there's a bus in front of you, and he said, there's a bus coming toward me on the sidewalk, and I say, I don't see the bus, and you're on the sidewalk saying, hey bro, get out of the way, there's a bus coming. He said, there's a point at which you get a little more intense. You say, hey, there is a bus, watch out for the bus. He said, if I still remain in the middle of the street, this is Penn's words, there's a point at which you tackle me to get me out of the way of this bus that I don't see. The conversation that this Christian had with Penn was such a moving conversation that Penn made a YouTube video about it. And in the video, this is what I want you to see. Penn saw this man's coming and telling him about Christianity equivalent to snatching somebody out from in front of a bus. It was information that this Christian saw that Penn needed, and he did it in such a way that Penn compared it to snatching him out of the front of a bus. Yet, at the very same time, it moved him in such a way that he wanted to tell others about the interaction. Listen, if you're watching this and you're the guy who approached Penn, I want to meet you, because I would love to meet this kind of individual. What kind of gentleness must this person have to be able to, one, confront somebody about their deepest core beliefs, and at the very same time move them to create a world, watched video about the encounter? That is gentleness. That is a prime example of gentleness. So we have it explained. Now we've seen an example, and you think about times whenever it's happened for you. I'll tell you, for me, one of my most recent times when I've been gathering some information for this book, and I first started trying to think about, how to get this message out. There's a guy, my buddy Dwight. If you watch this, I love you, brother. Dwight is actually a great friend to me. He's a great mentor to me. And Dwight has been on me for years about speaking in front of people. He's like, Casey, you got to do it. He's seen me speak at a few different things, and he's like, this is you got to do it. You need to pursue this. He keeps on pushing me in that direction. And so when I first started saying, okay, Dwight, I'm going to do it, he came to an event where I spoke, and he was there, and we got in the car afterwards, and we were talking about it, and Dwight said, yeah, this is Casey, you got to keep pursuing this. And I don't know, maybe I got a little confident, and I was like, okay, so you think I'm pretty good at this, Dwight? And Dwight said something that I'll never forget, after we were talking about it for a little while longer, and Dwight said, Casey, I'm not saying that, tonight you were like Andy Stanley up there. And if you don't know Andy Stanley, he's one of the best communicators in the country, if you ask me. Definitely, he's in North Georgia, a well-known person in North Georgia, the Atlanta area. And so Andy Stanley, great communicator, and Dwight wanted me to know at that moment, Casey, I see a gift in you, but right now I'm not saying you're Andy Stanley. He said there's some things that you need to develop, that you need to get better at. So that was tough information to hear, but at the same time, Dwight delivered it in a way that I received it, and I'll never forget it. It was amazing. It was so helpful for me. I actually started to read some different books about how to communicate better, how to structure a message better. How if I'm gonna be convincing, how do I structure the message so that I am convincing? And so obviously I'm still working on that. I'm not Andy Stanley today, but Dwight's criticism with gentleness actually propelled me forward. It didn't hurt me or crush me. It pushed me forward into being able to get better at the thing that he saw in me. And you see, that's when I experienced that kind of gentleness. And there's been other times, and I know there's been times for you as well. But I would encourage you, after hearing this, one, think about the explanation of gentleness. Think about how it could be extremely productive in your work to start to build relationships with necessary people around you, or extremely productive in being convincing to those around you, extremely productive in propelling them forward, encouraging them to make their next wise move. How could it keep you really engaged in the work that you're doing if you begin to develop this character trait? And you will make new decisions. In the moment, you'll act differently because you develop the character trait of gentleness. Dwight had already. This guy who approached Penn had already developed this character trait. He didn't make a pros and cons list with every moment while they were in the discussion. He just acted with gentleness, just like James March said he would. So listen, think about it today. Think about a time that you've experienced that kind of confrontation, tough words, or maybe a tough thing that you needed to hear, or new actions you needed to take, but someone gave it to you with great gentleness, and it was able to propel you forward. If you want to drop it in the comments, that would be awesome. If you don't, that's cool too. But then do that for somebody else today. Today, as you develop that character trait, put it into practice. Use gentleness to be able to give somebody the much needed information that they need without being able to crush them. Use it in a way to uplift them and push them forward, propel them forward. Thank you so much for listening to the Hands-Free Drive to Work.